Well, hi guys and gals, it's me George, the Shade Tree Fix-It Man, and I'm getting ready to do some work on my transmissions. I made a mount so I could mount them up side by side. This one here is my 5-speed. This is a Tecumseh Peerless 700 series. This one here is the Tecumseh Peerless, I believe this is a 400 series. Don't quote me on that. Let me look, see if it has another number. Yeah, it's a model 513, right? So it's a 500 series. This one here is a 770A. So that's the exact numbers of those two. And what I'm wanting to do, I've already pulled the bolts out of this one. They're essentially the same case, but this one is a 5-speed, this one is only a 3-speed. This is the first transmission that I had in the Goofy cart originally, and then I ended up picking up a lawn mower that had 5-speed in it, and I decided to switch it over. Now that we're going to an 18 horsepower engine instead of just a 10 or 11 horsepower, I figured I don't need the 5 speeds. Most of my grandchildren don't know how to shift a transmission properly, so with only 3 speeds, it would be much better. And if I could just eliminate transmission altogether and just put a torque converter on it, I would. But the way it's set up now, I'd have to do a whole lot more modifications. Anyway, long story shorter, what I'm hoping to do is take this case and empty it out and take the guts out of this one, and maybe all I'll have to do is change the gear cluster. May not have to change the output shaft. Now, one of the reasons I'm not just using this transmission is that this one here, 3-speed, does not have provision for a seal on the output shaft on the bottom. So it's always leaking. This one here, when I redid it, one of my subscribers and a fellow that I have followed along, he sent me some bearings and seals and all of that to do this one. I'm not sure if I didn't do it just right. I've still had problems with leakage on this one, but not as much. So anyway, that's the process I'm hoping to do, and what I'm wanting to do. And these have been sort of glued together. When I say glued together, that's because I used silicone for a gasket all the way around to seal the top of the case to the bottom. Now you can see this one here. Part of my problem too was this one here, I was just using, I think it was STP with a little bit of grease in there. Now let's see what this one looks like. I think it was a similar setup. I'll take this is where the shifter hooks on. Same setup for the shifter on both cases. Yeah, this is much gooier. Well, you can see this one is way, way down compared to this one here. And I think I used tacky, red and tacky. You see, I think I have some. And put that off to the side. Yeah, I used this red and tacky grease along with STP, and you can see it's pretty thick. Even what's in there, the mixture, is really gooey. and that's what I wanted. I figured if it was gooey it wasn't going to leak quite so quickly. And it looks to me both of these have reverse. If I wasn't having reverse, we could eliminate the chains on the two. And you can see here, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 speeds. This one here, 1, 2, 3. I think, see, this one has a gear on the back side of this tube. This one does not. I'm thinking that I may be able to just swap gear clusters. But we'll find that out as we get into it. So hold on to your hats. This is our next project on the Goofy Cart. We're going to continue disassembling these. And you notice one of the differences between the 3-speed and the 5-speed is that these gears on the 3-speed are considerably wider this way, thicker than these are. Naturally, because you get the 3 speeds in about the same spacing as you get the 4 speeds over here, and then the 5th speed down in there would have fit in here. So I'm taking this out, and we're going to transfer this gear set into this case so that we'll have the advantage of a gear oil seal on the bottom of the output shaft. And most guys, when they do a racing transmission, they end up eliminating the reverse gear. I'm not doing this. This is not a racing transmission per se that I'm building. I'm just making it more advantageous to take use of the extra horsepower that we should have with the 18 horsepower opposed twin over the 10 horsepower single cylinder engine. So I'm just going to lift the whole unit right out of there, and we'll see how this goes. I'll lift the whole unit right out, and I'm going to set it over here in this container. Never fails. Now I'm going to take this case and I'm going to take it out and dump it in my oil drain bucket. I'll bring you right back. Okay, so now I have the bottom case of the 3-speed all cleaned out, as you can see, and there's no real reason for me to do this other than to inspect it and to see. I want to make sure that the gear here is the same as the one in the 5-speed, and I have no reason to believe that they're not. And this is held on to the shaft by a snap ring, sometimes called a D-ring. And that comes off like that, and then this just slides up here. Now what you'll notice, we're not doing a full rebuild on this, and this is not the purpose of my thing here, but I want you to notice that there is just a thrust washer on the bottom between the gear and the housing. And that rubs on this aluminum housing. And I think that there may be room for a thrust bearing in my 5-speed, but we won't know that for sure till we get that torn apart. I can't remember. I have rebuilt both of these, sort of, kind of, maybe, at one time or another. Let me get this turned around here so that they're side by side. I might as well, while I've got this apart here, I'll put these parts down next to where they go. And this has been, both of them actually have been a little bit noisy, even though I greased these thrust washers. And if you look at that thrust washer, you can see that it has some scoring on it on both sides, which doesn't surprise me. Now, I have a kit that was given to me by one of my subscribers many years ago now, and this has the oil seal in it. It also has new thrust washers in it, and he sent me these bearings that could be used to replace just the thrust washer. But as I recall, when I tried to use them, here's the thrust washer. What was that? Oh, I just dropped a washer on the floor. But as I recall, when I tried to use it, it made it too thick so that the gear wouldn't sit down in there. You can see that would fit right in there perfectly. But I don't believe that the gear would go down in enough to be able to catch. Let me try it here. No, there's not quite enough room, I don't think, to get the thrust bearing on the D-ring back on, but that sure would make it smoother. That might work, actually. Well, we'll see. This isn't the case we're going to use, remember. We're going to use the 5-speed case. Oh, well, yeah, we're going to use the 5-speed case because the difference between the 5-speed and the 3-speed in the cases is right here at the bottom. This actually has 3 bearings down inside there. I don't know if you can see them or not, but there's 3 bearings in there, and there's no space for a grease seal on the outside. It's just this thrust washer goes right against it. Suppose I could take out one of those bearings and make room for the washer, but we'll see. This is the shaft. We're going to compare them both. They're essentially the same transmission with different gear sets. Essentially. Okay. Now I'm just going to take this gear set and set it right over in here. As I said, they're essentially the same setup. Get it broken loose here. Come on. Just going to take it right over and set it right in place. Right in here. We're not even going to try and set it up. I need to clean this mess out. So I'm going to do that. I'll get it cleaned up and I'll bring you back, and then we're going to compare the shaft and the gears and the casing and see what's the difference and see what we need to do to put our 3-speed gear set back into the 5-speed box. This is a 500 series. This is a 700 series, but they are essentially the same thing. You'll see what. Okay. I have this 5-speed 3-speed 700 series. This is a 700 series, but they are essentially the same thing. You'll see what. Okay. I have this 5-speed 3-speed 700 series. This is a 700 series, but they are essentially the same thing. You'll see what. Okay. I have this 5-speed 3-speed 700 series. This is a 700 series, but they are essentially the same thing. You'll see what. Okay. 5-speed gearbox cleaned out. And I discovered something that does not make me very happy. Can you see that right there? Coming up right out of there. That's a crack in the housing. And not only does it show on the inside, but you can see it comes right here, goes up, and it goes right up the side as well. See that? Now, that takes care of this case. We won't be using this one, but I'm still going to show you the difference between the two, and maybe I can make this one work. Now, I got to tell you, this transmission, the 5-speed, has seen a lot more use in the Goofy cart than the 3-speed ever did. 3-speed, trying to think. I'm not sure that it ever actually went down the road with it. It drove out of the driveway and back in, and I kept throwing chains and other problems. And I found the 5-speed, and I switched over to the 5-speed, and this is the one that we have used for all the times we've been driving it. So we're going to take this gear off, we're going to compare the two gears, and we're going to compare the cases. So I've got to find another place to put this set of gears so that they're not in the way. But let me get this out of here first. So we can make a comparison between gears. And if you can see down in there, now that I have the gear out, you can see that that crack continues right over, right into the housing. And this one only had a thrust washer on it as well. So I hadn't used the extra washers on it. I hadn't used the thrust bearing. Now let's pull that out. Well, before we pull that out, let's compare the two gears. One of the things that I noticed when I was cleaning it out was that the 5-speed box had a lot of sparklies in the gear oil. And I can see, it appears to me, that the 3-speed, this is the 3-speed output shaft, or input shaft I should say, gear, it appears to have a larger shoulder on the top here. And I'm thinking I might be able to cut that shoulder down so that maybe I can use the thrust bearing on the bottom and not just the washers. This one still looks better. The 5-speed still looks better as far as the thrust bearing surface than this one. This one is much coarser. I don't know if that's the way they were made. This one says 5D on it. Don't know what that means. There's no marking on this gear at all. But they appear to be identical as far as the tooth configuration goes. So we're going to look them over real carefully, and I can see that there is more wear on the 5-speed gear than there is on the 3-speed. And the 3-speed one, the gear mesh was down lower on the gear. So we're going to keep them separated. Let me pull this up out of here and we'll look at the outside of this. Pull this other shaft out if I can. It's stuck. I'll have to give it a rap tap with a little hammer. Well, you can't find a little hammer, use a bigger hammer. I made up this block specifically for holding these gearboxes. You can see I have a hole drilled down in there because this housing sticks down beyond the mounting bases. And you can see that this one has an oil seal in it. You see that? Okay, now we can see, maybe you can, maybe you can't. You can see that these bearings actually are recessed down in more than the 3-speed one was. And again, you can see the seal on this, and that bearing is recessed down in. And the reason is, I don't know if I can get you to be able to see down inside there or not. My lighting is terrible. Hold on a second. Okay, we're going to do some shaky cam work here, and I'll try not to shake it too much. If you look down inside there, you can see that there are only 2 sets of bearings, whereas I had showed you in the 3-speed case there were 3 sets of bearings. Now let's look at the shafts and see what the difference is, see if the shafts are any different. Okay, we have the shafts side by side, 3-speed on the left, 5-speed on the right, and I'm going to stand them up side by side. You'll see that they're both the same height, and it appears that the knurling on the tops of each are the same. I could tell you there is a lip right there on that one. There is not on this one. I don't know if you can see that, but there's a groove there, and you can definitely see that where the 2 bearings were running, and something was definitely grinding here. Now this one has a seal here, and you had seen the seal still in the case as well. So that means that I had put in 2 here's the seal in the case still. So I had 2 seals in there trying to keep the oil from leaking out. And they may have actually done the job. It may have been this crack in the case that all my oil was leaking out from. So I did have a mess in there. So that case is not going to be any help to us. So what I'm thinking, if the difference, and I didn't remove bearings from the 5-speed case. It only had 2 in it when I got it. It came out of a riding mower. I think it was a trying to think what kind of a riding mower it was from. It was a rear engine, I think a Toro that I got it from out in Minnesota. So that part was the same. This one had 3 bearings in it, which would say that that was a better setup. Now let me show you something, because remember where that crack was, and I'm going to take you and swing you over here to the goofy cart itself. See if I can get you up high enough. Yeah, see right there, that is a 2-piece collar. This is a collar that is made to fit snugly around that that input shaft casing. And then this sleeve here is one that I machined to fit the outside of this, so that I could weld this in solid and have a solid mount and solid support for the transmission. That is the weak point on these transmissions, is that input shaft, because it not just shaft itself, but shaft housing, because it sticks out so far. And so that's the reason for this. That was supposed to help stop the problem that we have. Watch out now, be careful, don't get caught. getting all hung up. That's supposed to stop that problem that we got right there with a crack. See, that collar fits right around here. You can actually see where it scuffed the paint off. So it did that with a 10 horsepower. I see it's got a second crack line going up here too. What's going to happen when we put 18 horsepower on it? Well, I guess there'll be only one way to find out. Now I'm wondering, let me take this and put this back into that housing. We're not going to use that housing, and we're not going to use this gear set. So now we got to figure out how we can make a modification Okay, I noticed something right off the bat here. Let's set this over here for now on top of the other one. But I'm noticing something, difference between the two cases right off the bat. Look at this one and look at how thick that support is around the bearings. This race right here. Now let's swing over here and look at this one. And this one is not nearly as thick, but it's wider. This one here, it appears that the washer was not hitting on the outside. Although there is a lip on the outside here, like that thrust washer was pushing harder. Almost no lip here, and a pretty heavy lip over here. So there was a lot of pressure on that thing. Okay. So now the question is, the 3 bearings down in there. You can see only 2 bearings down in there with a space in between them and a seal at the top. And I'm wondering if having the 3rd bearing, like the 3-speed case has, if that would be enough help to keep that from getting cracked again. I wonder if there's another way I can do some kind of machining so I can still get a seal on here. Or is there a little bit narrower bearing boss that would go down in there so that I could drop this bearing down a little bit further and get a seal on it? I'm going to do some investigation. That's where we're at. The cases are essentially the same, so I'm wondering if there's a way. There's not really room there to put a seal on that side. It would be good if we had a seal up in here, although we need the gear oil to get down to lubricate those bearings. On the other hand, if they're well greased when we put it together and the grease is sealed in there, you can't get out, there's no reason for that grease to dissipate. I got to think about it. Any suggestions and any observations from anybody would be a great help to this old man. So we're going to leave this where it is at the moment. I'm going to do some more homework, and see what I can find and make a decision on where we're going from here. Thanks for watching, commenting, following along with this project. And oh yeah, one more thing. Let me take you back over to the goofy cart. Now careful, don't trip on any cords or... I got it so it starts right up and it runs okay, but it's still puffing back through the carburetors. And my decision is that I'm going to pull ahead. I'm going to pull this head here in particular first, although the one on the other side is worse. But I'm going to pull this one because this one's the easiest one to do with the least amount of stuff in the way, and investigate the valve setup. I am seriously wondering where it's both sides, if perhaps the compression release is not closing back up enough when it gets going, and it's still losing compression through the carburetors. That's why it's getting exhaust coming up. So that's my next job. I'm going to pull this head off and investigate the valve situation, and we'll adjust the valves and all that kind of good stuff. Make sure everything's working good before we put it back together. But it starts right up, and it runs okay as long as you don't give it the throttle, and then of course it's puffing back up through the carburetor. No more babbling. Back to work. See you next time. Bye now.